Now, the war in Gaza also continues to have severe ripple effects on Palestinians living in the occupied West Bank. Hundreds of thousands of people there have lost their jobs, in part after Israel revoked Palestinian work permits following the October the 7th terror attacks by Hamas. Now, that's despite the militant group being based in Gaza and not in the West Bank. The loss of their jobs in Israel and the occupied territories is plunging an increasing number of West Bank residents into poverty, and this is cascading through the Palestinian economy with dramatic effects. DW's Fanny Facsar reports now from Ramallah and from the nearby village of Saffa in the occupied West Bank.
Construction.
Mujahid Samara says he worked hard and was proud he could provide for his family until recently.
We were working in construction before October 7, and then everything closed.
He can see where he worked from his home. It's behind the security barrier in Israel. He always needed a permit to go there, but after last October's Hamas terror attacks, Israel revoked that permit for what they said was security reasons. Tens of thousands of other commuting Palestinians in the occupied West Bank are in the same situation.
We're being punished. We're being suffocated. We're being besieged. We're under a lot of pressure. This is collective punishment for Palestinians.
Mujahid lives in Saffa, a village near Ramallah. Many here had jobs in Israel, but without the permits to go, they are left relying on informal work or savings. On top of that, everything has become more expensive. Inflation and slower truck routes through Israeli checkpoints since October 7th have been driving prices up.
We used to buy 4, 5 different kinds of fruit. Now we can barely afford one kind.
For many Palestinians, it's become a struggle to buy even the basics as the effect of job losses trickles through the economy.
The numbers are staggering. The World Bank estimated this May that 300,000 people here in the occupied West Bank have lost their jobs. Now, that figure includes those who commuted to work in Israel and those whose work has dried up right here because of the economic crisis.
Nassar Abdelkarim says the decision to freeze Palestinian work permits will further damage their relationship with Israeli authorities.
I think that will make backlash against Israel and settlers in the West Bank, because poverty, unemployment produces confrontation, produces what we call a struggle against the power they think that's responsible for their suffering.
Mujahid's family relies on the efforts of 2 of his sons who still have work in the West Bank and his wife.
There are many women who try to help their husbands, planting things to sell. But in general, there aren't many options. We're left with no alternatives, and we're left to deal with the circumstances.
Israeli forces have controlled movement of Palestinians in the occupied West Bank with barriers, permits, and checkpoints for decades. Now, it's all even tighter. And yet, Israeli companies need workers like Mujahid. They have started hiring people from other countries like India, sparking fears the poverty here could become permanent.
And we can speak now to Fanny Facsar, who produced that report for us. She's joining us now from Jerusalem. Hi, Fanny. I'd like to pick up on that last point that you made in your report, the fact that Israeli companies are now hiring overseas workers for jobs that were once filled by Palestinians. This is presumably a new development since October the 7th last year.
I mean, there have been foreign workers, obviously, before October 7th here in Israel, but that labor shortage is just massive ever since that general ban, that policy by Israel is in place. So tens of thousands of jobs are vacant, and now what the government is trying to do, while businesses here in Israel are really calling them to urgently come up with some solution, is to bring in foreign workers, for example, from India or Sri Lanka. What they did is a few months ago bringing in a few thousand workers from India. There's a close relationship, by the way, between Israel and India, reportedly on subsidized charter flights. But that's just a drop in the bucket, a lot of businesses here say, because workers are lacking in every segment. I'm not speaking only about construction workers, but also people in tourism, restaurants, services, etc. And the problem here is also the administrative hurdle, obviously, to bring in foreign workers. It's not just about putting them, obviously, on a plane and just come to Israel. It's about getting a work permit. It's about getting a visa. And all of that, of course, slows down businesses. In fact, a lot of businesses in Israel are complaining and saying that already they're on the brink of collapse because of the financial problem that the lack of labor is creating. At the same time, obviously, ironically, those tens of thousands of jobs could be easily filled by Palestinian workers if there wasn't for this ban. But that's not the case. Palestinians in the occupied West Bank that I've been speaking to are really struggling and suffering because they can no longer access the jobs that they had before October 7th.
And you're saying that this is really plunging many of them into real poverty. I mean, is there anything that the Palestinian Authority can do to help at least cushion the accumulative effects of all of this?
The general consensus, looking at the Palestinian Authority and the lack of power, really, they administer about 40%, roughly 40% of the occupied West Bank. 60% of it is controlled by Israel, while Israel, since 1967, so that's nearly 6 decades, is occupying and controlling the occupied West Bank militarily. So having said that, of course, a lot of observers say there's not much the Palestinian Authority can do. However, at the same time, not only economists, but also ordinary citizens there in Ramallah, on the streets of Ramallah, I've been speaking to say, wait a moment, the Palestinian Authority could at least try to fairly distribute whatever resources they have. That also means that they would need to crack down on corruption to become more effective. So obviously there are both sides to the story, but ultimately, and I think this is very, very important to mention, the longer the war in Gaza continues, the more likely it is and higher the risk that this economic crisis that the occupied West Bank is in could turn into an economic collapse.
DW senior international correspondent Fanny Facsar reporting from Jerusalem. Fanny, thank you so much.